Next point. Remember that an easement is inseparable from the estate to which it either actively or passively belongs. You cannot alienate an easement separately from the estate to which it belongs, either actively or passively. It is inseparable from that estate. How may easements be acquired? Either by title or prescription. But remember one very important rule. Only continuous and apparent easements may be acquired by prescription. Discontinuous easements or non-apparent ones can only be acquired by title, not by prescription. That is the reason why an easement of right-of-way cannot be acquired by prescription. Because an easement of right-of-way is discontinuous. It may sometimes be apparent, sometimes it may be non-apparent, but it is always discontinuous. Even a railroad easement, an easement in favor of a railroad, may release, etc., that is still considered as discontinuous. What is the prescriptive period for acquiring easement? By prescription, 10 years. When does the period start to run? In the case of positive easements, on the day in which the owner of the dominant estate started to exercise it upon the servant estate. So, if the opening is made on a party wall, that's a positive easement. From the day the opening is made, the 10-year period starts to run. In the case of negative easements, the 10-year period will start to run only from the date when there is a notarial prohibition on the owner of the servant estate. If I make an opening on my wall facing your property, I have to serve you with the notarial prohibition, telling you, oh, do not block my light and view. The 10-year period will start to run only then, upon service of the notarial prohibition. You take note, however, of Article 624. When there is an apparent sign of an easement between two estates, established and maintained by the owner of both, and these two estates are disposed of, either or both of them are alienated in favor of others. And at the time of the alienation, nothing to the contrary is provided for in the contract or agreement, nor are these apparent signs of an easement removed, hindi tinanggal. Then, upon the alienation of either or both of the two estates, these apparent signs will be considered as title and would enable the easement to continue after the alienation. Example. Lot 1, Lot 2, both owned by Mr. X. On Lot 1, there is a house, and there are big windows here facing lot number 2. Okay. Lot 1 was sold to Mr. A. Lot 2 was sold to Mr. B. At the time of the sale, nothing was said about removal of any easements. The big windows were not closed. Sige lang. 1 year later, Mr. B is trying to build on his property. Sabi ni Mr. A, okay, pare ko, I have an easement of light and view. If you want to build on your property, you have to observe 3 meters. Ang sabi ni Mr. B, teka muna, nasaan ang notarial prohibition mo? How could you possibly have acquired an easement of light and view when you never served any notarial prohibition on me? Who would be correct? A would be correct, applying the provisions of Article 624. The existence of those big windows is an apparent sign of an easement in favor of this property. Since that apparent sign was not removed at the time when these properties were alienated by the former owner, they will now be considered as title, and the easement will be allowed to continue. Okay? Yan ang ibig sabihin ng Article 624. Gargantos versus Tanyanon. You take note of Article 626, which is a new provision in the Civil Code, which, according to most commentators, including the members of the Code Commission, is intended precisely to counteract a previous ruling of the Supreme Court. Kasi under a previous ruling of the Supreme Court, nangyari ganito, merong sugar mill. It had an easement of right-of-way over intervening estates so that it could transport the sugar cane of sugar planters located further on. Sabi ng Supreme Court, if there are new sugar planters who would also want to have their mills, their sugar cane milled in that mill, okay, the sugar mill can also use the same right-of-way to transport the sugar cane. According to most civilists, including the members of the Code Commission, mali yung desisyon na yon in Valderrama versus North Negros Central. Kaya nga daw, nagkameron ng Article 626. Under the present article, the owner of the dominant estate cannot use the easement except for the benefit of the movables originally contemplated. Neither can he exercise the easement in any other manner than that previously established. So, 626 is precisely intended to correct that former ruling. So, under Article 626, hindi pwede yun. The milling company cannot use the same right-of-way to transport the sugar cane of other additional planters who were not contemplated when the easement was earlier established. Tama ba ito? 5:30? Ha? Tama-tama lang. Tama-tama lang. Okay. Tapos natin to. Okay lang. Tama-tama lang yung number of hours na binigay ni Dean Riano for property, 12 hours. I was actually telling him Oh, kaya ko ng 8 hours yung property. One time, I was able to do that. Pero, I now recall medyo stressful. Yung bang nagmamadali ka dahil naghahabol ka ng kuwan. So, pakiramdam mo minsan parang majijingle ka na hindi mo maintindihan. Talagang black. At saka problema nun, sa pagmamadali ko minsan, there are some points na you might not be able to discuss anymore. Okay? So, I suppose 12 hours is just right. Okay? If we are able to finish easements, we have 4 hours pa. Yung modes of acquiring ownership, sandali lang yun. Tapos donations. Donations, less than 2 hours yun. So, pag meeting natin sa Thursday, I am almost sure we will be able to finish property earlier than 4 hours without even having to hurry. Yung okay lang. Okay? All right. On rights and obligations of the owners of dominant and servant estates, of course, expenses for the maintenance of the easement, this will have to be borne by the owner of the dominant estate. The owner of the servant estate, if it becomes apparent later on that the location or manner of use of the easement is turning out to be very, very inconvenient to the owner of the servant estate, may propose a change in the manner or location of the easement. Okay? If there are several dominant estates, they will all have to contribute proportionately to the maintenance of the easement. Okay. Modes of extinguishing easement, you take note of Article 631. Merger. Again, just like usufruct, merger of the ownership of the dominant and servant estates. That will result in the termination of the easement. The merger must be a permanent one, not simply a temporary merger. Okay? If it is merely a temporary merger, for example, the owner of the dominant estate sells his estate under pacto de retro to the owner of the servant estate, the easement is not extinguished, it is merely suspended. Upon the exercise of the right of repurchase, it will obviously be revived. Okay? Renunciation by the owner of the dominant estate, that also terminates the estate. Non-user for 10 years. If either or both of the estates fall into such condition that the easement could not be used, but the easement will revive if the conditions improve, unless in the meantime prescription has already set in. On legal easements, easements relating to waters, yung lower estates are obliged to receive the water, including the soil and other materials which naturally flow from the higher estate. Okay? As long as everything happens naturally, walang human intervention, bumagsak ang ulan, may mga bato, etc., water which flows to the lower estate, there is no obligation to indemnify. If there is human intervention, however, halimbawa, the owner of the higher estate draws water from a river, uses the easement of aqueduct and transports the water to his estate, uses it there for some business or industry, tapos yung excess water falls to the lower estate, there will be an obligation to pay the indemnity.